What is up, everybody? Welcome to another World Cup preview here on Touchline Talk. Before I jump in, want to say be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube so you don't miss the rest of these World Cup previews with the tournament getting ever so closer. And you make sure you find the rest of the content I put out every single week. You can also find my written work on Substack, touchlinetalk.substack.com, as well as on Medium. Okay, today, rounding out Group F with Morocco. This is Morocco's sixth World Cup appearance. Also made it in 1970, 1986, 1994, 1998, and 2018. So this is two in a row for Morocco. Best finish, group stage. Morocco still looking for that first appearance in the knockout stage of the World Cup. To get to Qatar, Morocco entered second round of Confederation of African Football qualifying. We're in a group with Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, and Sudan. Won all six of those games to get to the third round, which is that playoff round. They were drawn with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, won 5-2 on aggregate to secure their spot in Qatar. In terms of players, the two bigger names, I just go alphabetical, so the two bigger names are the second and third guys I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to start with Ayoub Kaabi. Ayoub Kaabi led this team in goals and assists. 5 goals, 3 assists, so 8 total goal involvements in qualifying. And he did it in 443 minutes. It's not like he played every single minute of all 8 of these qualifiers that Morocco participated in. He was really productive. He's one of the most accomplished goal scorers in the history of the Moroccan men's national team. He made 2 appearances at the last World Cup. And he moved to Hatayspor in the Turkish Super League for the 21-22 season. So this is his second season with the club, but his first full season, 18 league goals in a pretty good league when you're talking about Turkey. This guy knows how to put the ball in the back of the net. He knows how to make things happen in the final third. He's one of the most proven players on this team at this point. Not the big name like the other two guys I'm going to mention here momentarily, but a guy you need to know about when you're talking about this Moroccan team and players who are going to be key to their success, specifically when it comes to actually scoring the goals in Qatar. Now for the bigger names. Second, Achraf Hakimi. Achraf Hakimi was 19 at the 2018 World Cup. He played every second of all of Morocco's games. His career, his resume, the clubs he's played for, reads like a who's who of the best teams in the world. Borussia Dortmund, Inter Milan, Real Madrid, PSG. He had 2 goals in 7 appearances during qualifying. That's not really what this is about. This is about Achraf Hakimi being one of the best young players in the world. Achraf Hakimi, still as he's not even really in his prime yet, sort of starting to enter it now as he's getting to his mid-20s, being one of the best right backs in the world. Certainly one of the best attacking defenders in the world. He was incredible for Dortmund and then really good for Inter Milan, and that resulted in the move to PSG. He's sort of taken a weird path with all of these clubs in terms of trying to actually get an opportunity to be a lockdown starter in his early 20s. Dortmund was where that started, and then it just kept going from there. So, no, it's not like he has played a vital role for every season he spent at all of these clubs, particularly Real Madrid at the very beginning. He got to a point where he was getting on the field some, but he really cemented himself at Dortmund, and it's just continued to go from there. And now he's playing for PSG, starring for PSG. He is the biggest name in terms of, maybe not resume, because the next guy has perhaps a more impressive resume in terms of what he's been able to do in the Champions League. But from a profile standpoint, a where they're at in their career standpoint, Achraf Hakimi is definitely the biggest, most accomplished player in terms of international star that this Moroccan team has. Now, the other guy who's close is Hakim Ziyech. And of course, this is, Hakim Ziyech, who was a star for Ajax when they made the Champions League semifinals and very nearly got to the final. And a Hakim Ziyech who contributed to Chelsea winning the Champions League. This is also Hakim Ziyech who was exiled from the Moroccan national team by Vahid Halilhodžić. And then 3 months before the World Cup, managerial change, Walid Regragui, let me try that again, Regragui, apologies, Walid Regragui comes in, brings Hakim Ziyech back into the fold for these final tune-up games in September before the World Cup. So I'm operating in a world where whatever happened is in the past and Hakim Ziyech is going to be on this team. He had 3 seasons in the Eredivisie in the Netherlands with double-digit goals and assists. He was incredibly productive. That's why he got to Ajax. That's why he then produced at Ajax and got the move to Chelsea. The Chelsea part of this has not gone particularly well. That's just the reality of the situation. Playing in a different kind of system, incredible competition for spots day in and day out. He's in that same position as Christian Pulisic from a U.S. men's national team perspective, where it's just really hard to lock down a spot at a club like that who is always going to spend and always going to bring in more competition. But what Hakim Ziyech gives you is the stuff you can't teach. The instincts, the technical ability, the creativity, the ability to make something happen out of nothing. That is where his skill set lies. Is he the most well-rounded player in the world? No, not at all. But the stuff that Hakim Ziyech is good at, he's as good at as just about anybody in the world. And so you put him in a position where he's not just a role player, but he is the guy who's responsible for facilitating a lot of this attack and working with Hakimi as kind of a 1-2 punch and as the guy higher up the field as the true winger. That puts him in a position to be the best version of himself, to maximize these incredible technical skills he has. And so he's one of those players for me where you got to have a different conversation about what he means to a national team than he does to his club, because there are other guys who can provide some of that skill at Chelsea, because everybody at Chelsea is really gifted. That's not the case with Morocco. What he brings is much more valuable, and you're willing to kind of live with some of the shortcomings he has, because he's one of those guys that can create that moment for you that wins you a game. And the other part of this, and the reason I wanted to bring him up, was, like I said, we're talking about over a year he was out of the national team. He wasn't a factor in qualifying. But you get the managerial change, and all of a sudden, here he is back in the fold heading into this World Cup. So that is going to be a big part of this Morocco storyline in Qatar, assuming Ziyech makes the team. And as I'm recording this, I have no reason to believe he's going to be excluded, considering he got brought back in for that last camp. In terms of a breakout star, I went with Watford's Ismail Louza. Came in sort of at the end of 2021 for those qualifiers, making his national team debut. In his first 4 appearances for the Moroccan national team, 2 goals, 1 assist. Immediately started contributing. Started 17 times in the Premier League for Watford last season. Of course, they got relegated, so he's back down in the Championship. Injuries prevented him from really getting going this season, so he only started playing in October. So he's had a nice, month and a half by the time we get to the World Cup to sort of build, and now he's getting to the point where he's back in as a regular starter for Watford and assuming the position he held and was going to hold this season until he was sidelined with that injury. So should be all systems go for the World Cup. And on a Morocco team that has plenty of proven players and was relying on so many young players at the last World Cup who are now much more established, guys like Hakimi and Ziyech. To me, Louza is one of those guys who can be sort of that next generation, or maybe that's a little bit too extreme to call it a generation, but that next group of players who kind of comes in for that next World Cup cycle and provides some youth and a little bit of energy and just something different as opposed to the guys who are already established at this point. In terms of the bottom line, the reason for optimism here for me is that every single important player from qualifying is in their prime in that sweet spot between 22 and 32. You've got some guys who are on the younger edge of that. You've got some guys who are in their late 20s, early 30s. But you are in the sweet spot for basically this entire roster. And you combine that with the fact that that means, because you participated in 2018, guys like Kaabi, Hakimi, Ziyech, Romain Saiss, you can keep going down the list. There are certainly, it's not the exact same roster. There are some guys, some bigger names who were big parts in 2018 and are not big parts of this team now. But there is this core group of players who were key pieces in their early 20s and in Hakimi's case at the age of 19, who are now, 4 years older, 4 years more experience playing at high levels in Europe, competing on the biggest stages. Now veterans, battle-tested, and ready for this experience instead of just kind of being wide-eyed and happy to be there the first time. They sort of know what to expect the second time around. So for this group of players, it's not quite as good as the group from 2018, but for this group, this World Cup could not have come at a better time, lining up with sort of their timeline and where everybody falls from an age perspective. You got a lot of guys who are experienced at this point and still in their primes. So that's my reason for optimism. The big question is, what is the impact of this coaching change? Does it end up being a good thing or a bad thing? And I say that not only because obviously you don't want to change managers 3 months before a World Cup and just sort of throw out everything you did to qualify for the World Cup and bring somebody new in. That being said, there were clearly some cultural, maybe that's not the right word, but cohesion, maybe that's the better word, cohesion issues under Halilhodžić. Everybody was not pulling in the same direction, and Ziyech was out of the picture. There's a real argument that this is a change that had to happen and will end up being a positive for this team. I really do think that is a logical hypothesis to have heading into Qatar. It wasn't like this was because everything was falling apart. This was because there were just some philosophical differences and you kind of had some divisions within the group, and everybody looked at the situation and said, it's in our best interest to part ways. And so now, this can go one of two ways. Either you've got a much more unified team that's on the same page, and it's a major plus, or you have a team that's still trying to sort of figure out how to put these pieces together, even with Ziyech back in the fold, and they're trying to blend the styles and philosophies of two different managers, having had basically, a camp and whatever build up to the World Cup you're going to have, to figure this out when most of the teams you're competing against have been going with the same group of players and the same coach for the better part of 4 years. That's obviously a major concern, but I do think it could end up being a positive. So that's my big question is, what do we end up thinking about this decision to change managers so late by the end of this? And from an overall picture standpoint, I do think the managerial change was their best hope of getting out of this group. I didn't see a way it was going to happen with the situation as it was, and watching them play the U.S. men's national team, and not having Ziyech there, in another group, they're at least team 3, if not team 2. That 2018 was sneaky. 2018 team was sneaky good. I was really high on them, and they ended up disappointing. But this, to me, they are the quote-unquote best of the worst teams when you're looking at the fourth team in a group. And that's because, again, the weird Canada situation from the World Cup ranking standpoint that put them in pot 3 messed this whole thing up, because Canada is not a third team in a group. Canada is a team that should make the round of 16. And then you have 2 other teams who also should make the round of 16 in this group, and then you have Morocco. There is not a better top-to-bottom group than Group F in terms of the gap between the best team in the group and the worst team in the group. And so Morocco got a really, really tough break in that sense. I would be hesitant to predict them to go through any group just with the turmoil and the turnover that's happened here and how quickly they have to put this thing together. And I'm extremely hesitant to do it in this situation. As high as I am on Canada, I mean, Croatia made the World Cup final in 2018. They're not going anywhere. And so you just have 3 teams that are clearly better than this Moroccan team. And that wouldn't be the case in any of the other groups, but it's the reality of the situation they find themselves in. So, like I said, when you're looking at the best, putting yourself in the best position to get out of this group, I do think Morocco have done that by making the managerial change, by bringing back Ziyech, all of that. I just don't see it being anywhere close to enough. So much has to go right for you to pass not one of these teams, but 2 of these teams in this group. Do I think they're going to end up pointless? No, I think they're going to, again, this is one of those situations where I could absolutely see them determining how this group shapes out because they beat somebody, they get a draw that, drops somebody from first to second in the group or ruins somebody's World Cup and determines who goes through. Something like that. I do think they're going to be a factor and they're going to be competitive. There are just no points to be had easily, which is a major problem when, you don't need to win one game and collect 3 points. You got to start getting into the 4, 5, 6 point category to have a real hope. So this is Morocco getting out of the group would be one of the surprises of the group stage for me. But it's not because I don't like this team, because this team isn't talented. It's much more about the situation they find themselves in. That is all for the Morocco preview. Thank you so much for tuning in. As I mentioned at the beginning, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.